Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lorenzo. Welcome to this panel about sim racing, esports, and the digital side of speed. An introduction about what we are about to talk. So, a parallel world full of millions of enthusiasts of sim racing and video games. So, no petrol, no track, no license. So they use joysticks, simulators, high resolution screen and wheels, and in these platforms they can compete against each other. A brand such as Ferrari, Lamborghini and Pagani drivers can use these cars to train. It's not a traditional world. Gaming is undergoing a major transformation in a year. Its sales were higher than movies and music, 184 billion. Many brands and Formula One teams are using simulators to develop aerodynamics, pieces of their cars without investing too much. So let's kick off this meeting with Daniele Cancelli, project leader, Boston Consulting Group Milan. He will talk about this topic, virtual racing revolution, opportunities and breakthroughs in e-racing. Daniele, you have the floor. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Daniele Cancelli. It's a pleasure for me to be here. It's an honor as well in this region. And I see people who are passionate about motorsports and cars. I'm a project leader. I work for Boston Consulting Group. I am an engineer. I have been working in the automotive industry for almost a decade. I worked with McLaren. I carried out several projects and I wrote down the technical specs of a simulator. I tried to create a bridge between the real world and the virtual world. I'd like to introduce a very important element. This presentation is called Virtual Racing Revolution. Revolution means a ongoing change that is shaping the automotive industry. This is the starting point of my presentation that is going to last 15 minutes. And it will become a standard. The standard is here, the change is here, the change is ongoing, the revolution is ongoing. I'd like to introduce you how and why. So you see the three steps of this revolution. It all started as a game, a pure entertainment, engagement towards customers were quite limited, but then it became an asset, a measurement tool. And I'll elaborate on this later on. We can find new talents, we can explore new online platforms, we can try to engage consumers differently through this tool. And now it is becoming a new standard. It is evolving. It is accelerating. It's an actual revolution. How? Through Gen AI, virtual reality, hyper personalization, and R&D activities. But let's set the scene. Gaming and simulation can be divided into three macro groups: mobile games, accessible and on the go; console games, when you introduce an interface; and then professional simulators. I like to focus on professional simulators, a personal experience. I'm an engineer, and when you enter a cabin, you understand why simulators are important. Hamilton says it every single week. There's a subtle line between real world and virtual world in order to find a customized solution. It's a thin line. Let's talk about figures. 1.3 billion players of racing games. 1.3 billion, this is impressive. 4 times the US, 20 times Italy, but it's plus 50% compared to 2020, so an impressive number of people and an impressive growth. 50%, plus 50% compared to the pandemic. I like to focus on 3 points. Point number 1. Kimi Antonelli, in January, his technical director said something quite interesting. He was shocked by how Kim can spend entire days in front of a simulators. 100 and 150 launches on the simulator that test his physical resilience, but these new drivers have a stamina, that mental stamina that other drivers didn't have. Driving means automation as well. A driver can be tested in what he can do in terms of strategic thinking, energy management. And this comes from a constant use of simulator. Point number 2. So point number 1, simulator as a training tool and as a capacity enhancement tool. Point number 2, Verstappen, you know him, of course. Qualifying session, 24 hours Le Mans, and so on and so forth. This is what he did, but I'm not going to talk about him this way. In 2024, during an e-racing game, Verstappen met a driver, an e-racing driver, and in 2025, he funded the move of this driver to GT3 racing. So a simulator isn't used just for training reasons, but for scouting reasons too. Point number 3, Twitch, streaming. Think about it. Here you see quite an impressive number. There are 2 impressive numbers: 5.1 billion hours of gaming watch time in Q2 2025, and 72% of its audience is under 34 years. And this is the consumer of the future in the automotive industry, a guy who is under 20 and who spends 7 hours a week watching other people driving other cars, and they don't even have a license, a driving license. So gaming is the first interface towards brands and products through a streaming platform. So simulation for training, scouting, and streaming purposes. This is an actual revolution. And this revolution is faster and faster. It's still ongoing. And you can't lag behind. But I like to stress these numbers once again. Here you see an overview of data. I want to focus on the last figures here. First of all, what counts for OEM's P&L and business. This technological tool can be used in order to reduce R&D costs 20-30%. It's the last point here. And this is quite relevant, specifically here, Italy and Emilia. Costs are higher and higher, and development times are quicker and quicker, and China leads the way. We have an habit 42 months to develop a new car. This is a typical German model, but in China, they do it in 28 months. How can we reduce development time without impacting quality? You can use simulators. Simulators can reduce costs and time you spent in a wind tunnel in the real world. Second point, 10.5% annual growth. These figures are impressive, and it's only about racing games. But today, this market has a 2.6 billion value, and in 10 years' time, 6.4 billion. And there's business value here for Emilia as well. So it's important not to lag behind. But what should we do? And where should we operate? Here you see the 3 reasons to get excited. I've already mentioned the first one. You can deliver faster, smarter, and innovation is cheaper. Then, how can we reshape customers' engagement across the life cycle in the automotive industry? Third point, how can we get new revenues? Additional revenues. I like to focus point number 2 here. This slide, it's a bit complicated, but the concept is simple. Gaming and simulation can be relevant in the whole funnel, from brand engagement up to conversation. They play different roles within the funnel. So the whole funnel, but gaming at the beginning, simulation at the execution and conversion stage. Some examples. As for gaming, in the luxury world and in other words, in-game vehicle launches are used. So during the launch of a new car, the car is shaped and presented as part of video games so that these vehicles are made accessible to everyone, of course, virtually, so that everyone can understand these new products. Then, simulation, virtual configuration and customization. We worked with a luxury OEM, and we are exploring options to increase revenues for customized products. So for each car, how can we increase the number of options or the quality of options? So we've analyzed the entire process, and the bottleneck came in the option to monetize additional value, because it depends upon the dealer's capacity to explain additional components and their relevant benefits to customers. So we made an experiment. We went overseas, VR, goggles, simulated world. Each customization could concern special painting, a leather cockpit, kind of wheel. All these options could be seen by the customer, and the customer loved it and wanted it. And as for customization in luxury brand, you can get 50-20% more thanks to options. In this case, you can exceed 50%. So you can double the revenue thanks to a more constructive customer engagement. But we are in Emilia. Let's try to explore new opportunities here. Opportunity number 1. This is the more mature opportunity that is being seized by Ferrari, Lamborghini, McLaren, using a brand in video games. And this is possible with legacy brands. They're getting extra revenues. Then esports and sim racing. When I worked with McLaren, I remember the beginnings of sim racing. And on top of that, sim racing is great because you can get merchandising opportunities. You can propose additional merchandising items. You can sell accessories and options through a graphic interface. And then there's another element which is very important because there's untapped potential. Simulation as a service. When you enter a simulator, you understand that the know-how level is quite high. So you must invest time and money to grow such know-how. Once this know-how is built and grown, you must be good to make it available to other entities as well. This is what is going on in China. There are hubs that specialize in this area. This could be an area that could be developed here in Italy as well, in this region. Let's wrap up. We are going through a revolution. This revolution is accelerating. You can't miss the train. You have to hop on. The main message is AI is accelerating and you can't lag behind. You can't wait. So you got to hop on this train, this fast train, to seize all the relevant opportunities. Here you see some examples of what could be done. Tesla had the capacity to create a digital twin for each car. In their database, they enter all user data of the relevant car. So Tesla can adopt a predictive maintenance approach. So it's a win-win situation. Your customer is happy, and at the same time you can reduce costs because you do not need stock. The aftermarket is controllable, and so on and so forth. But now, what will come next? As I mentioned, we are living in the Gen AI era. And what will come next? You see here, Gen AI will influence vehicle design at scale. So there will be a constant flow of information coming from the customer, reprocessed and becoming part of engineering. Then Gen AI will help us create a programmable product. You decide to go to the seaside after this conference. You drive, and there are some turns, there are some vibrations in your car, and so you ask the product to change the suspension, or you ask the product, the car, can I drive differently? So cars are not just pre-configured by engineers, but a car adjusts to your needs as a driver. Then there's another point, the evolution in the R&D area. R&D activities are faster and faster, and they're trying to integrate these benefits within OEMs, but within the supply chain, generally speaking. So it is important to embrace this word. I'd like to thank you for your attention. It's been a pleasure to be here with you today. But just a couple of remarks. I can't wait to hear the panelists that are about to take the floor. It will be great to listen to their point of view. I'm sure they will focus on the elements I've just mentioned. Here, there are people who are redefining the space between the virtual world and the real world. I am available if you want to discuss about these topics. You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can send me an email as well. Virtual racing revolution. We are living an experience. The train is speeding up. We must hop on it. It's expensive if you do it night, but it will be much more expensive if you do it in 24 months time. Thank you.
And now it is time to speak to Andrea Fossetti, founder and CEO, head of simulation technology and marketing strategy of Driving Simulation Center, who will talk about how simulation can become an infrastructure and how we can move beyond the simulation and it can become an ecosystem that is able to generate value for customers, brands, companies, and territories. Let's wait for the streaming. Hello. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. I am sorry that I am not there with you live, but if we talk about real and virtual, distance is not important when there is substance. Daniele from Boston Consulting has just shown why virtual racing has become a strategic lever for brands and territories. But knowing the figures is not enough. The real question is, what do we need for this promise not to be just a graph? How to transform a virtual racing from a pastime to a technical infrastructure and cultural infrastructure? Well, the reason why I'm here is to tell you how we can move from the things as they are to a business model. So simulators are no longer an object, they are an ecosystem. For several years, we conceived simulators as a series of pieces, bases, steering wheel, pedals, seat, and screen. Yet this is just a visible part. The value is born when one combines all of these elements and they dialogue all together. A serious simulator is made of hardware, software, ergonomics, content, assistance, and continuity. This is important because the keyword here is perceived. So drivers do not assess the technical figures. They feel the steer, they feel the movement, and they understand what matters and what they see. When these things do not speak the same language, experience is not convincing. That is why companies, enthusiasts, those who want to build a center, well, for these people, this is crucial. All of these infrastructures all together need to interact. Moving to the following slide. So that is the selection of components. That is the choice of what we need to use to build and to assemble the simulator. We trade professional components, but we do not have a catalog of what we can sell because not everything is fine. So we know these brands, Fantic, and so on and so forth, but not all of those are eligible to be configured within a structure of simulation. It is dangerous to think that the more products you have, the more value you can offer. The real question is not how many brands a company can distribute or can have, but what components can work together in a stable way, and most of all, in a consistent way. It gives the opportunity to assist me with competence and by avoiding to failing the customer. Moving to slide number 5. How can we do integration and method? So the difference between installing and making things work. Not everyone dwells on this because the integration of components is something that is not trivial. Today, with tutorials, anyone can mount a workstation, but doing so in a consistent way over time, well, that's not really easy. To some kind of users, yes, but if you're looking for something more specific, well, that's a whole other thing. We do not just connect devices. We look for consistency between steering wheel, movement, pedals, driving position, and mostly the driver's experience, because the important thing is that whenever we drive a simulator, we have to drive and feel something during the driving session. That is why, over time, I have developed with a university, the University of Salerno, an internal protocol that is called Intelligent System Technology, SID, to make sure that everything can tell the same story, that anyone who is driving that kind of simulator can enjoy a wonderful experience. We are not trying to build something in the first 30 seconds. We want to have a system that can be controlled and that is clear. Slide number 6. This leads to the opportunity to create a business, i.e. a center of simulation. Yet a business is not born out of nowhere. It is crucial to have a business model because selling that to an advanced enthusiast, but building a simulation center is a whole other thing. That's a room with 4 simulators. The wow effect lasts 10 minutes. The business model has to last much more. Otherwise, it's not an investment for investors. And the other people I get in contact with, well, the first thing one thinks is not starting from the number of simulators. I start with the idea that I want to know who enters that center and what they experience, what their feelings are, and why they want to do a certain thing, and mostly, how can I can conquer that person and make them come back, and why should they pay for something that they could do at their own place. A center can become a corporate engagement space, an event space, a place for enthusiasts, and access to real motorsports, competition, and content. Yet, if there is no format, if there is no training for the entrepreneur and a technical support, that cannot work. It is crucial to have a format. And the most serious thing at times, and it has already occurred to me, is to say no to a project, even though there were the economic capacity to do so. Because selling a product, protecting a model, means creating long-standing activities. And for those who create simulators, well, our goal is to protect entrepreneurs so that the investment they made is a long-term and sustainable investment. But that requires previous training. And if it's not part of our skills and with our capacity, and if they do not want to accept those rules, well, we prefer not to offer that. Slide number 7. Our role, we are a bridge between producers, technology, and the real market. That is why, to me, our position is peculiar. We do not just do something better than everybody else, or we try and do that better than everybody else. We try and work in that part of the supply chain where we sell the product, where we try and understand the needs of the customers, understand how to do that installation, to create some form of assistance that is available 24/7 without having actual people there, because it's impossible to have that 24/7. That is why we have to use AI in our assistance systems. And that is why the budget is crucial, because if the product is not clear, the client realizes that, notices that. If the system is not integrated, any virtual driver and also real drivers do not feel that, do not notice that, do not have any feeling with the product. Instead, if the center of simulation does not have a clear model, well, that has an impact on the revenue. So from the station to paddock, what's left and what's missing? Well, before I receive a final question, and I know that Lorenzo will ask me something, I will anticipate something. Many drivers are moving from virtual to real. Verstappen, for instance, these are some of the most important people. But how much of what we learn on the screen can be transferred on track? Well, that teaches us to read a band, to deal with braking, and to make decision, yet it cannot completely replicate the strength of the body, or it can replicate that partially. Not everyone can afford to have simulators such as Dallara. Consequently, we need to talk about things that has some limitations. The strength on the body, the fatigue after an hour of driving, which one can also experience on a simulator. The smell of petrol and tires that are wearing out, yet you're sitting on something, standing still at your place or within a center. So you cannot replicate that emotional aspect that otherwise you would have while driving a real car. That is why it is crucial to reduce that gap. They need to reduce this gap between reality and the artificial, so simulation, dynamic platforms, mixed reality. These are steps ahead, but replicating the whole reality is not that easy. That is why it is crucial to talk about an ecosystem, a system that evolves with technology, but is anchored to what we really need. sim racers, which can be considered a driver, and to the business as well. Slide number 9. So back to the question. What do we need for virtual racing to be something more than a knee game? Well, we need to select, integrate, and design. We need to think about people who use simulators and those who fund simulators. We need to transform a promise into a system that works, because in the end, simulation cannot be improvised. It needs to be built. And it doesn't matter if I am not here with you and I made many mistakes, because it's not easy to speak to people virtually. I have learned, though, that building is the only way to make the real and virtual race on the same track. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Andrea Rossetti. One final question, even if you have anticipated my question. I'd like to ask you, Max Verstappen, Norris, Kimi Antonelli, they're all using simulators before going on track on a real car or on cars. So my question for you is, are physical limits, psychological limitations in simulators that now or in the near future cannot be replicated? Is there something that is still to be fixed? Well, the truth is that a simulator teaches a lot, mostly today, because it develops the capacity to read a bend, the track, to adjust steering, and it focuses on concentration. For many young people, simulators are the first test where they can learn the language of speed. Yet there is a limitation. No platform beyond those that are used by Dallara, Ferrari, or other big manufacturers that can get to a big replication of laps. It cannot replicate the feeling of the tension you feel on your neck, the fatigue after 30 rounds where you're one-on-one with a competitor, or the adrenaline of a real departure. Even if in sim racing cars you're still tense, it's not the same as on a real track. So simulation is a powerful tool, yet it's no magic wand. So the technological challenge basically is to fill that gap. Dynamic platforms and mixed realities are doing huge steps ahead, and we have to create an ecosystem that is closer and closer to these two dimensions. But be honest. Let's be honest. It's not the same. We are talking about two very, very different things. So what is my takeaway message for you? Well, we can have the foundations, and once you're on track, you already know what to expect, and mostly during some moments of one-on-one, of battle on track, and mostly of concentration, that can help. But once you are in a real car, the heat, the sweat, the physical side that a platform cannot replicate, the personal emotion, the real emotion, the adrenaline, well, that's where you understand that the complete journey comes from system to the road and finally to the business model that can make you live all of this. So we can use simulator for what it is, i.e. a trampoline, but the real competition is won through feelings that no technical sheet and no type of product as of date currently it is not possible already, so we cannot simulate. Thank you for your kind presentation. Let's now move to the roundtable. I'd like to call here on stage those who produce hardware or virtual cars, those who develop the software that makes this car feel real and that brought an iconic brand of motorsports in the virtual world. Alessio Cicolari, CEO AK Group and General Manager Dallara AK Esports. Good evening. Alessandro De Leo, PC and Smart Devices Leader of Lenovo Italy. Good evening. Alessio Romito, Digital Innovation Manager Dallara. Good evening. And remotely, Fabio Roberto Soggio, CEO of Cube Controls. Good evening. I'd like to start with a question to Alessio Cicolari. AK Esports is one of the most important examples for the virtual world and for a collaboration between a historical brand like Dallara and esports. How was your partnership born and what has changed for you? Well, how many hours do I have? I don't know. Well, before starting, I'd like to add something to the previous panelists. So it is true that simulation, real world are different things, but simulation is a world, it's a completely different world. Some gamers are okay with just competing on the digital world, and this does not necessarily have to be a different thing. So sim racing also generates samples that are very happy to do that. And that's everybody's dream, but that doesn't mean that one cannot go to the real world. That's not a merit. So I'd like to say that the Motor Valley has always been the case, so we can move to virtual to real, but everyone does the opposite. So from virtual to real, like Marx, who does this and has more fun. So with the Dallara, well, I have been more than 7 years with the Dallara. We have started before the lockdown to discuss, to work on some projects related to innovation and sim racing. We came from a year 2015, when we started some activities in paddocks. We were among the first to bring simulators within the racing ecosystem. We did the first tournament with Sport Imola. We brought a simulator on stage with Senna, Schumacher, and so on and so forth. I remember that. I do not remember who the winner was at the time, but to us it was a trampoline. And then we proposed the same thing to Porsche Italy with a first version of a single brand championship. The first year Enzo Bonito won, and now he's in the same team as Max. And we brought this first driver to have a driving license, and in the final competition of the tournament, it was sort of crazy. Enzo was a great pilot, a great driver, yet it was a bit of a dare. A few years later, a year later, we started working with Ferrari, and we won the F1 tournament with them. So for sure, it was an activity that afterwards became successful. And I was amazed by many of the things I've heard. So we decided to try and see these esports and e-racing activities, not just in sports-wise, but also technology-wise. I'll be brief so that we can have a first roundtable all together. We started thinking, in addition to championships, which we did remotely the first year, but that was a difficult year and we had to do otherwise. But luckily enough, I know it's a bad word when we talk about COVID, but luckily for our sector, COVID meant that there was a boom over those years. We developed some technologies and then we brought those technologies to the real world. So during an activity in Indianapolis, we asked to Dallara, who had offices and branches there, to help us manage the assembly of simulators to do a first test of what we already did in Europe, so Fantech exporting that. So 2 real drivers were driving before the real competition. So during that visit, we did some tours in the company with some local partners, And at that point, I am a bit blunt when it comes to proposals. So I did a presentation and I sent Andrea Pontremoli, the CEO of Dallara, my idea that could be developed as partners, as we were doing in Europe, or to create something together and develop this new concept of simulation. Dallara developed that already, had already developed that, but Dallara uses simulation for the production of cars, and they did that even before that was born with the wind tunnel. So that's where the idea came from, and it's called Dallara K Exports. I know it's not very well, it's a bit trivial, but we have two names, so let's start with one. We have several projects connecting to sim racing, and with this technology, I mean, not just what is useful to the driver, because a lot of effort is required by a whole other series of experts, engineers, those who work on the setup, managers, coaches, those who work beyond drivers and train them, and all strategies you mentioned earlier. And I had the same experience in Ferrari when we started working with real engineers, when we did the virtual Le Mans in Maranello, where there were engineers that followed the car of Bonito Tonizza and all other cars. So from there, we started saying, well, this pipeline of training can become something interesting. So our driver, who works for Dallara now, Giovanni De Salvo, was first driver for esports, then in Ferrari, then he became a virtual engineer, and now he works for Dallara as a vehicle engineer. Another one works for an F1 team. So this pipeline works. In Indianapolis, in our headquarters, we have a motorsport engineering department together with the most famous engineering university in the world, and we are talking about project to make sim racing be something that develops other jobs, not just pilots, drivers becoming good, because motorsports, well, you can excel when you have the whole team. The ideal teamwork, which is an activity we do as team building in the United States, and motorsports teach how to work in team, because if there is no teamwork, you can be Schumacher, you can be Senna, whatever you want, but you will not win the competition. So basically, we are working on a different plan, different than usual, and entertainment and competition, which is okay. But we do believe that in this moment, if we think about the technology that is very prominent, AI and virtual reality are very strong right now. Yet behind all of that, there's a series of jobs that are interesting for schools, that is interesting for brands. Because if they have simulated 2,000 competitions with 2,000 strategies, well, that's a whole other thing. You know very well that you do 100 competitions per week, not just one per week. You mentioned a factor. Well, Porsche drivers used to do a virtual race before going on track. So how can we recognize a driver, and how can they adapt to a virtual race, to a physical race, and vice versa? How can they be combined? It was not Porsche. Many drivers were able to be the same with the two activities, because many of them were native digital, so they trained specifically on simulators, and then there's Aris, who took part in the development, not just of the game, but all the activities, BOP, and so on and so forth. So he knows very well, because he met all engineers and OEM brands, but some drivers, I can say, that were very close During the pre-show, for instance, we would acquire the quick rounds of drivers, and we would do a fast lap for them virtually, and we would put them side by side. Most of the time, it was a difference of milliseconds, and competitions were very intense. And in Discord, there were engineers that were studying the competitions, and when there was a DOP that was not working well, they would speak to the whole team. So it was a high level competition. The older generation had a hard time, but this is what you all experience if you're not used to sim racing. Once you try a simulator, that happens because your brain does not understand a 3D, and so it has a hard time to use that. But once you're in the game, everything is different. But it was very, very close. They were very similar experiences. Thank you. Thank you. Let's now move to Alessandro De Leo from Lenovo. Well, Lenovo is one of the most recognizable brands among gamers. What is the impact of hardware in the quality of the sim racing experience?
I could ask Alessio. First of all, what is Lenovo? Lenovo is the leading company for PC manufacturing, and we work with many different players, casual players and sim racers. We are here to talk about those who want to compete at the highest level performance-wise. What does it mean to build a PC for a gamer who wants to look for simulation? It's a matter of performance. Our products are used by video gamers so that they can challenge themselves and exceed their limits. And this is why it's so fun, to game. And Lenovo is the latest company to enter the market with a brand for gamers. Actually, it was the last company that has a dedicated brand. And what did Lenovo do? Lenovo listened to its communities. The community looked for a specific kind of product, and this product had to ensure high, stable performance. You've said it. We need simulation to be as close as possible to reality. So no lagging is acceptable. The experience must be seamless. Otherwise, you disconnect, you experience fatigue, lack of focus, you stress out, and this is detrimental to your performance. I was studying our legions, and what is unique about them, 280 watt as CPU accumulated power. So this is what the simulation can actually do in terms of experience. An ordinary notebook is about 90 watts, same size, but the power is 3 times higher. And this is what's interesting technology-wise. The research and development about cooling as aerodynamics and tires as essential for cars, and they are important in terms of performance during a lap. Aerodynamics and tires play a key role from this point of view. The same applies to PCs. Keeping temperatures under control is essential. It's the only way to ensure high performance, especially like today when it's very hot and you work hours with a PC. So you own Lenovo computer in your simulators. And what about you? Well, I just checked our simulator. Despite the hot temperatures, they are still going strongly. I assume that there will be 30, 50 degrees today. No wind is blowing, and we have many sim drivers that work at home with their computers. And when temperatures rise, there's a thermal device that reduces power, and I will tell you what's hidden in our PCs. Another question for you. For Legion, how is demand changing from casual gaming to pure simulation in relation to those who want to approach this world, and for motorsport teams as well? As I mentioned, we have always manufactured gaming PCs. Legion is quite recent. Then there's Lock, which is for casual gaming. Each gamer must find his or her own dimension. What is important is keep on having fun, keep on gaming. I don't drive virtual cars, but I'm passionate about the strategy. And you told us that these guys start playing with a simulator and then they discover that they are passionate about it and it becomes their job. For instance, you could play SimCity and other games, and I don't know if I get skills out of it. And what you said is very interesting. We work with the schools a lot and we create team building activities as well with video games. Video gaming is created to develop some skills, and management can understand what their employees can do through video gaming based team building activities. Italy is not that innovative, especially in the education sector, but we're trying to to take these activities to the schools because it will be a great tool to understand young people's skills. We worked with Lenovo a couple of years ago. We worked with Intel with VR goggles, and we used a game as part of a VR to work on history and geography subject matters that are quite boring for young people and young pupils. I used to play Caesar 3, and it helped me develop my critical thinking. Smarter technology for all. This is Lenovo's motto. You can always find a product to play and have fun. Alessio Romito, a question for you. Dallara has one of the most powerful simulators in Europe, and it's used for training purposes. Is there an actual gap that is getting smaller and smaller between virtual reality and reality? Well, a professional driver is used to training with a simulator. Hamilton was mentioned before. He said that he only wants to use simulators. And many drivers use simulators, and this is highly beneficial because there's a thin line between virtual reality and real reality with simulators, specifically if simulators are powerful both in terms of hardware and software that can create real conditions. As for our simulator, it's not just a matter of platform. It's not just a platform that moves. It's not just about integration between hardware and software. This is essential. It's the underlying mathematical model. This is the heart of our know-how. Iron metal parts can be easily replaced, but our true heart is the mathematical model. This is what we're good at. These models replicate the sensations that you can feel on the track. So we are talking about driving, but we should consider tracks as well. A car that is 100% simulated, okay, but if you can't simulate the track perfectly, you do only half of the job. This is why at Dallara we created skills for creating tracks that are as close as possible to real tracks. It's quite a challenging. It's quite challenging because tracks change constantly every single day. There's a new curb, a new turn, a tree that is pruned, and so the driver has no reference point to brake. And then seasons change, and so a building can be visible or not visible as seasons pass by. So we sometimes change these tracks on the fly so that the drivers can have a prep session that is as close as possible to the real thing. This concerns professional drivers. As for amateur drivers or wannabe drivers, those who dream of becoming a driver, a simulator, a home simulator is an ally. Driving on track is quite expensive, and sometimes you have a limited number of laps with any online services to book 2, 3, 4 laps on the track, and it costs hundreds of euros. And if you get to that experience after hundreds and hundreds of laps on a simulator with that car and on that track, even if you can't become a professional driver, you can prepare your weekend on the track so that you can really enjoy these 5 laps with a coach next to you that helps you explore and exceed your limits. As Andrea said, you can understand what it means to drive with your body. With all the different ingredients, the sound, the sweat, the anxiety, the excitement. So you prepare for your weekend and the payoff is incredible. I've experienced this. You are much smarter in making the most of the opportunity. So a simulator is a key tool. What's the difference between virtual reality and reality? Well, of course, it all boils down to hardware. It is virtually impossible to recreate the perfect conditions with a consumer-grade simulator. With a professional simulator, there's an underlying data center, and it's hard to create the same conditions for a consumer-grade simulator. You would need a new data center. So maybe this gap will be filled. And with cloud gaming, will go this way. I like PC gaming, but with the evolution of data centers, you know that consumer-grade simulators could improve a lot. Anyway, PC gaming is great. Thank you. Today's simulator. What kind of tool is it? A tool to develop a driver, or is it a technical development tool? Well, it's great for drivers, but I like to focus on the technical part. The simulation level that exists today with video games you can buy and use at home is quite high. Cars and tracks are developed properly based on engineering rules. So gaming is the best way to learn new things as an engineer. I studied physics university, but I had never focused on how weight is transferred in a car. So you can apply engineering principles to a game, to gaming. So what you learn on a sim about weight transfer and a car setup is useful when you work on real cars. And it's really fun instead of playing on a console. So it's a sort of entry drug. You get a great experience. So what you said, it's true. This is a tool for both engineering skills developments and driver skills developments. Sim racing can help choose a profession. We have many colleagues at Dallara that during weekends become track engineers for GT drivers. And they do that thanks to the skills they have developed at Dallara and with the simulators. Thank you so much. Fabio Roberto Saccio, CEO, Cube Controls. Good afternoon. A question for you. Cube Controls was born out of sim racing, and you started a dialogue with professional motorsports. And how thin is this gap between simulation and reality? This gap between simulation and reality is very, very thin. It equals to zero. We started 10 years ago with a simulator, and then 5 years ago we started working with some car manufacturers to develop wheels for motorsports, and the whole world opened up to us because we could see what happens in motorsports with 3 years in 2-3 years in advance. So we could anticipate trends on simulators as well. The difference between a sim and a motorsport is that in motorsports, they look for accuracy in details and reliability. As for simulation, they look for interface, sophisticated interfaces, and a captivating design as well. So we try to combine these two requirements, and we realized that in motorsports, people appreciate it. Our company works 60% in simulation and 40% in motorsports because we have developed almost all the wheels for the big Motor Valley-based car manufacturers. Another question, how do you conceive design hardware for professional drivers and virtual drivers, and how do you tackle product development? We look for a mix between two dimensions. When a car manufacturer asks us to develop a product, it depends upon budgets. So we try to create shared platforms so that sim racers can have an actual motorsport feeling and car manufacturers can have a competitive price. Of course, numbers are much higher with simulation. This means that we are very competitive in the motorsports market, and we try to transfer what we learn in simulation into motorsports and the other way around. So this gap is very thin. Thank you so much. Question for all of you. My last question. Everyone can fall in love with a car by trying it virtually? Is it a challenge or is it an opportunity? So everyone can test a car virtually. Is this a threat or is it an opportunity? Is it a challenge or an opportunity? That's quite a peculiar challenge. I'm referring to sim drivers. It could be a hypercar or it could be a banana with 4 wheels and the driver doesn't care. If you are a sim racer, you are passionate about cars, and so you are familiar with cars, but you can test these cars virtually, which can be very helpful in terms of hardware. For instance, wheels. I like to congratulate Cube Controls. I've just visited a center in Indianapolis, and there was a whole area about the Cube Controls. So a big round of applause for this Italian company. It's not easy to compete in a market which is dominated by German and Chinese entities. So as for interfaces, PCs and stuff, you get closer and closer to actual cars. Of course, the experience is different with an actual car. And for many brands, it's interesting to operate in sim games as well, because it can be very useful in terms of brand awareness. I think that many brands study brand positioning strategies in video games so that consumers can appreciate their cars. I think this is quite common. We use this tool a lot, especially for fan engagement activities in trade shows and dealerships. Of course, I am not here to help the Lara for the Ferrari or Lamborghini, but it is a great tool for brands to appeal to new customers. Thank you so much. As for Lenovo, what matters is ensuring that its customers can play their games. So this is our goal. They could use a PC, a tablet, a Legion, anything. It could be a very innovative product. We have recently presented a POC in March in Barcelona. It's a Legion with an extendable screen from 16 inches to 21 inches, so you really feel inside the game. It's an immersive experience that is unprecedented. It is a POC, so it's a proof of concept, but Lenovo is quite famous because proof of concept become mass production items very quickly. Then, of course, you can drive the car you like, any kind of car. So this is our goal, ensuring a technological infrastructure so that software and hardware can ensure the best, most engaging experience.
As for my answer, well, I would have said it's an opportunity. Then, thinking about it while we were talking, well, the opportunity is still there because it's more of an experience for a new car on the market, and that helps people fall in love with your car. So yes, for sure, that's an opportunity. That is the reason why we are trying to do so. because these are the only two B2C cars that we do in Dallara and that we build, and we are trying to putting them into the video game world. For instance, last year we launched it on the Corsa Evo website as an official content, and we hope we will probably get to other sites as well. So that is crucial. What is the challenge ahead? Well, it is to convey the feeling of a supercar, of a hypercar in a realistic way. I'm thinking about the Dallara Stradale. So how can I make a young guy understand what 150 kilos of weight means on a simulator? That's tough. How can you understand what a steer is without power steering? It's tough. On a steering wheel, of course, you have a feeling of that, but if it's electronic, you cannot do that. Or how can you understand what a throttle is? So it's challenging if we relate that to the person who will purchase that kind of car. And unfortunately, it's not young people or teenagers. It's difficult also in terms of driving license, as we said earlier. XP is track only, so probably a 14-year-old could drive that. Back to the challenge. It is hard sometimes to make people fall in love, not just of the aesthetics, but also of our cars. So in order to be driven, well, our car has been driven virtually. The Lara Stradale, when I drove that physically, that was extraordinary. You cannot be prepared to what a car can do if you understand that you are the limit. So going back to the beginning of the discussion, that prepares you, but the impact is always, always hard. So I see that as a challenge and as an opportunity. One needs to do that, but with reasoning, because the challenge is important. Thank you very much. We will listen to Fabio Roberto Soggiu. Yes, to us, is a possibility, starting with the concept of sharing, so finding part of our products in the sim racing, but at the same time you can find the same product in an e-formula, in a F1, or in a hypercar, while having the same tool in the simulator for us is already giving a tactile feedback and an additional feeling to those who do sim racing. Well, maybe not all those who do sim racing will have a hypercar to drive, yet we would like to give the possibility to have the same feeling with the same materials. Thank you very much. A round of applause to all of you. Thank you for being here with us. Before leaving, I'd like to invite all of you to try and test. There are some stations, sim racing stations, and I think it will be held in Piazza Grazia, close to the Dome. So if you would like to test them, feel free to do so, and you can feel the feeling of virtual cars. Thank you for being here, and bye-bye.